A new controller from Aeolian entered the studio, the ALK10, and as you can see on the box, it's designed to mimic the Super Nintendo layout, remade popular by 8BitDo, for example, and also Koyorvis had a take on it, which I reviewed a couple of months ago. This one has a few interesting things. We have Hall sticks, not necessarily new to the shape. We have 2 extra buttons up top. We also have a higher pulling rate, which caught my attention. So let's open it, see what it's all about, and if it's worth your money. The controller, a Type-C to Type-A cable, and a controller manual. Amongst the extra features is an ABXY button swap function to go from a raw to corrected stick value. D-pad and left joystick swap function, turbo, macro, adjusting vibration on the fly, controller calibration. There it is. It also has different modes, this one. You can have an X input, D input, Android HID, and switch mode. Now, as you notice, there are no dongles, and that is indeed the case. This operates fully either wired or Bluetooth. We have membrane face buttons, membrane D-pad with a center pivot, Hall effect sticks. We have large sticks, nice to use overall. Function buttons are tactile. You have a rumble motor, which is haptic, not rotary. Membrane shoulder buttons and membrane triggers as well. Very stiff membrane there, and tactile for the extra buttons. Nothing in the back except the switch, which I actually was not sure what the switch is for. It essentially is to remember the device that you connected to using Bluetooth. So for example, if you want to have one for your Switch, and then another one for your PC, up to 2 devices that it remembers. Great detail. Now, of course, I took this one for a run on my PC. We'll go over all the performance, all the testings I've done. So let's not waste a second more and go do that. We'll start with a quick sound test and then the usual D-pad, stick, trigger, as well as testing in games. Sticks. So we had no tremor, no snapping to the axes. There was no snapback. I was surprised to see that. You can adjust from raw or corrected circle. That's a nice touch as well. Inner dead zone. There were no dead zone on the right stick, whereas there were on the left stick. I was surprised to see that level of detail. Not that it would matter, and you'll see during the stick testing, but nonetheless, a nice touch. No gap dead zone and a little bit on the outer dead zone, both on the left and right stick. The stick tension landed at 75 TGF, so it's a stiffer stick than most, and the resolution at 0.0039. Nothing special when it comes to the sensor. D-pad, which is a really traditional one. Diagonal focus was super easy to achieve. The rolling test, not the most comfortable. You know, I wish the rubber was the plastic was a little softer, but otherwise it's good. Adjacent direction, extremely easy to hit. So if you play a lot of platformers, you may like this, as it is not a problem. Now this one caught me off guard because as far as I'm concerned, I saw accidental inputs and I thought it would reflect in the D-pad testing, but it didn't. And I actually played off camera and that hasn't been an issue. There's definitely a center pivot. It's a little hard to not hit any arrows when pushing it down, but it is feasible. And as far as using your D-pad from the center, it's overly easy to just roll all over the place. Yeah, no challenge at all to get this done. I still did the trigger test, but seeing as they are fully digital, there was no dead zone. One thing, there is no dampening either at the end of the digital actuation. It's gonna work for some games, but it's just not built for anything where you need analog triggers because they're not. This is not a stick for aiming. Let's just get this out of the way. The scores ranged around 20,000, but one thing this controller also has is gyro redirection, which I've tested on my second attempt and it was terrible. It just wasn't good at all. However, it was pleasant to see that the X-axis for your movement does use both the yaw and roll, and of course your tilt will control your Y-axis. There's a little bit of tweaking that you can find in the manual. I mean, if you buy this controller and you want to try it, by all means, see if you can tweak it to some better degrees. It was just not a great implementation for aiming. Maybe for convenience in some titles, I could see that working. But if I was to try gyro, I would probably try to lean on the wired mode using Switch and using Steam input to rather just use the data and let Steam handle the rest. Because what is on board. It's nice that it's there, but it's just not great. Typical cheap Hall effect sticks, that's essentially what they felt like. For games like platformer, for games where aiming is not a problem, it's gonna be fine. Or for like simple camera control, that's going to be fine as well. When looking D-pad, I expected accidental inputs. It's not the perfect D-pad, but it's more than usable. It's going to be one of those that it'll do a lot better on platform than it will on command inputs, but it's still very decent. See it this way, if I was to go from a platformer to a fighting game holding this controller, I wouldn't bother to grab another one just for the sake of. I would just continue with this one because it's good enough. I think what saves this D-pad actually is the center pivot. The center pivot really gives you a little bit of rapid action from going from one direction to another. It's extremely responsive. At first, I thought it was going to be too responsive, but considering the membrane that we have, you do have some sort of a reaction time, a buffer before running into an issue, which I think is what made it not have accidental inputs while I did when testing on Gamepad Tester. But at the same time, there was definitely what felt like a threshold in terms of just being fast on that D-pad, and Run showcased it for me. But in terms of responsiveness, again, very good. In terms of precision, latency, buttons felt amazing. But when it was down to rapidly going from left to right, which is super important in this game, it was a little challenging. All right, let's move to the next test. Not much else to say here. As we mentioned, these are digital triggers, so there was no nuance, and the acceleration or brake, it was from 0 to 100, and that's all there is to it. Pleasant feeling triggers and shoulders, but not analog, so there's nothing more to test. It's just binary, zeros and ones. And lastly, performance, which you'll have the slide in a second. In terms of latency, the buttons were particularly fast, so D-pad and face buttons. The sticks a little slower, but all things considered, fast, still absolutely bearable. If anything, the sensor was probably what held back, and then just the quality of the module, which I don't know what they are because I don't open controllers. A cheap stick, but in terms of responsiveness, it was fine. But of course, if you want the exact numbers, it'll be on the chart, which will appear on the screen very shortly. When coming down to the wire, the 1000 Hz pulling rate did not hit 1000 steady, but it was nice that it was there. And also, I was surprised to see a Bluetooth mode hitting 200 Hz pulling rate. Now, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, the Bluetooth switch mode when connected to PC, which would get recognized, the moment it would connect, it would also disconnect. So I was not able to pull that one. And also, I tested on the Switch. It does have the wake up function. Gyro worked well. And anything else you may wonder, Steam input, it's all going to be on the charts that will appear right now as we go towards the end of the video. We haven't talked about price yet. This goes for $16 US, or at least I've seen it as low as $16 US on AliExpress. And in my opinion, where I found that CoreOrvis did not manage to overtake the 8-bit do, I find that this one is pretty interesting. As you've seen through the testings, it's not good for everything. Aiming is not something you want to do. The gyro redirection is there, but it's not going to save aiming with this controller. But for retro, the buttons are traditional, snappy, responsive, very good latency on the buttons. And when talking performance, it was nice to see up to 200 Hz on Bluetooth. You may have noticed I didn't put the Switch Bluetooth mode on that chart. It is because whenever I would connect it to my PC, it would disconnect. I don't know why I did that, but as far as X input through Bluetooth goes, I was happy with the performance. Latency was good as well. It feels, of course, cheaper than the 8-bit do, but it doesn't feel as cheap as the CoreOrvis, and the fact that it's so light makes it very, very pleasant to use. A great controller for retro gaming. This is something I can see myself using whenever I'm using the Nintendo Online Entertainment emulators on the Switch, or if I play retro games on PC. It was really, really responsive for continuous use. There's nothing I can really fault this controller for when looking at what it is clearly designed for, which is retro gaming. Strongly recommend it. Such a great price point. Would have been nice to have a dongle, but considering how inexpensive that it is, I like the balance that Aeolian achieved with this controller while still injecting quality. Would I have enjoyed having a software? Would I have enjoyed having a dongle? Of course I would have, but all things considered, what you get as a package deal here is pretty compelling, as long as you know what you're gonna use it for. This is not the Call of Duty controller, but I don't think anyone would buy it for that either. And there you have it, guys. There's gonna be an Aeolion K20 review coming out shortly, so if you're interested into that, let me know. Thank you very much for watching, clicking on the video. If you have any inputs, make sure to drop them in the comments, and to leave a like, and to subscribe to not miss any future one. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.